year-long funding for SNAP, for WIC, for veterans, for essential farm programs, and for a number of other critical priorities will be met. Mr. President, I said that we will be voting on the final package in the very near future, and I'm hoping that will be hours and not days. We're on the 41st day of this shutdown. Nutrition benefits are in jeopardy. Air travel is an extremely precarious situation. Our staffs and many, many other government workers have been working for nearly 6 weeks without pay. I could spend an hour talking about all the problems we've seen, which have snowballed the longer this shutdown has gone on. Aware of the facts. And I'm grateful that the end is in sight. But I would encourage every member of this body, Democrat or Republican, pro-bill or anti-bill, not to stand in the way of our being able to deliver the coming relief quickly. The American people have suffered for long enough. Let's not pointlessly drag this bill out. Let's get it done, get it over to the House so that we can get this government open. Mr. President, as I have emphasized since being elected Majority Leader last November, I remain deeply committed to advancing full-year appropriations bills through regular order. And we've drafted this continuing resolution to extend to January 30th specifically to give us more time to get this bipartisan work done. I look forward to taking up additional appropriations bills on the floor in the near future. Mr. President, after 41 days, I'm grateful to be able to say that we are close to getting the government reopened. And again, I ask all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, of both parties, to make it possible for us to quickly pass this bill. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alsoo-Brooks.
Mr. President.
Majority Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, yesterday the Senate took a major step forward on the path to reopening the government. The bill before us is simple. It's clean, it's bipartisan, it's a continuing resolution, and it funds the government through January. It's paired with 3 full-year appropriations bills. So let me repeat that. Appropriations bills for the full next year. Now, these are bills that have already passed the Senate with bipartisan support, broad bipartisan support, I would add, and they were negotiated on a bipartisan basis with the House. They're fully funded in terms of veterans care, and look, this is critical. Tomorrow is Veterans Day. Our veterans need to know that we stand behind them. It's also fully funding on food assistance, SNAP, WINFIT. It's ready to go. Let's remember that this shutdown has caused serious pain to many, many American families. People who have stood in line around the block at food banks all across the country. And that's because 42 million Americans missed their SNAP payments. Flights were delayed and canceled because control towers are understaffed. People there working are overworked. Yesterday, there were 2,000. Yesterday was now, the government is finally on the path to reopening. This is the right result. This is what the American people need. They need certainty. And opening the government provides that level of certainty that the American people want, especially heading into the holidays. So I want to thank President Trump. I want to thank my colleagues in the Senate and both sides of the aisle who voted to support that. You know, the President stood strong when Chuck Schumer stood here and demanded tens of billions of dollars be sent from the federal treasury directly to the bank accounts of health insurance companies. President Trump's leadership protected taxpayers and continues to protect the country. Now, let's be clear about what comes next. The Senate is going to use the next few months to pass the additional appropriation our economy, to secure our border, to invest in our military, to promote fiscal responsibility, and we have to do that after 4 years of high prices and an open border. That's what Republicans in this body and across the hall. Republicans are making the appropriations process work again. Last year, Senator Schumer refused to the appropriations passed out many times unanimous appropriations bill, but yet the minority leader refused to bring them to the floor. It's no way to run the government. That's no way to run the Senate. It's not leadership. The debate ahead is also about the many failures of the Obama health care law known as Obamacare. This is a debate that Republicans welcome. Mr. President, health care in America is broken and is unaffordable, and it broke the day that they passed Obamacare. Costs have exploded. Obamacare premiums have gone up 221%. That's what happened since the law. President Obama at the time said premiums for families would go down by $2,500. It was all wrong. Democrats have no answer for that other than more direct subsidies directly from the federal government, directly into the bank accounts of the insurance companies. Republicans believe Americans deserve high-quality, affordable health care. Americans haven't gotten that since the day Obamacare became law. It's time, Mr. President, to reopen the government. Suffered too long. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Also Brooks.
Democrat leader.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
So, Mr. President, the last 41 days have exposed the depths of Donald Trump's cruelty. He shut the government down longer than any president in American history, took innocent kids, veterans, federal workers as hostages, political hostages, all because he refuses to do anything to fix the health care crisis and instead keeps pushing policies or on SNAP. Last night, Trump cannot take 42 million Donald Trump isn't satisfied. Today, even more cruel, he appealed to the Supreme Court mean things over the years, but twice, to ensure kids go hungry. Donald Trump would rather make hungry Americans suffer, make kids suffer, make veterans go hungry and disabled individuals suffer, than do anything to lower health care costs for the American people. The American people will not forget Donald Trump's the last 6 American people have now awoken to Trump's health care crisis. Health care is once again at the forefront. They see that premiums are about to skyrocket. They're terrified about how that we find a way to fix this crisis and quickly. Refuse to move an inch. So I cannot support the Republican bills to do anything of substance to fix America, causing millions of families back. Republicans now own this health care crisis. They knew it was coming. We wanted to fix it. Republicans said no, and now it's on them. When people's out-of-pocket costs double or triple, very soon Americans will know Republicans made it happen. When 60-year-old couples start paying $20,000 a year for health insurance, they'll know Republicans made it happen. When 4 million Americans lose insurance, when kids with cancer are priced out of coverage, when families face financial ruin, they'll know Republicans made it happen. And the pain will only get worse as more and more people on ACA and with private insurance see their premiums go up and up and up. People out there are struggling. It's harder to make ends meet. Rent is up, groceries are up, people's electricity bills have gone up, and now, thanks to Republicans, health care costs will spike dramatically. The past few weeks have exposed with shocking clarity how warped Republican priorities truly are. While people's health care costs have gone up, Republicans have come across as a party preoccupied with ballrooms, Republicans' breach of trust in people is deep and perhaps irreversible. And now that they have failed to do anything to prevent premiums from going up, the anger that Americans feel against Donald Trump and the Republicans is going to get worse. Republicans had their chance to fix this, and they blew it. Americans will remember Republican intransigence every time they make a sky-high payment on health insurance. Yield the floor. Note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Alston-Brooks.
Democrat Webb.
Are we in a quorum call?
Yes.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, after a record government shutdown of 41 days and 14 roll calls failing to reopen it, the situation was clear. Donald Trump and the Senate Republican leadership were unwilling to do anything to reduce skyrocketing health insurance premiums, a terrible problem facing some 24 million American families. The shutdown of the government stopped paychecks for thousands of federal workers, causing real hardship for their families, including our overworked and understaffed air traffic controllers and many other critical members of the federal workforce. Food pantries in my state and across the nation were overwhelmed when President Trump stopped SNAP food payments to 42 million Americans, 1/3 of whom were children. Food pantries being overwhelmed as well by unemployed workers who'd been laid off and furloughed because of the government shutdown. So a group of senators sat down to try to find a bipartisan resolution. After lengthy negotiations, an agreement was reached with the Republican Senate leader, John Thune. We will agree to open the government until January 30th, 2026. During that time, we will pass 3 bipartisan appropriation bills that will fully fund SNAP, WIC, and all the veterans programs and finish our work on the remaining spending bills for this fiscal year. The agreement would also reverse the Trump administration's mass firings during the shutdown and prevent future ones through January 30th. We credit Senator Kaine of Virginia for this provision. Leader Thune has also promised the Democrats an opportunity before mid-December to present a Democratic bill on the floor with proposals to change the law and protect American families from dramatic health care premium increases. It is my fervent hope that this ends up being a bipartisan effort. It would be such an achievement of the Senate to finally return to that status. I've served in the Senate for 29 years, and I've never seen that kind of offer from a Senate majority. During the historic roll call last night, I walked across the aisle and met with Senator John Thune, the Republican leader. I told him that I was counting on him to keep his word on this agreement. He assured me he would. The fate of this effort depends on both the Senate and the House of Representatives. After a 7-week absence, the Speaker Johnson needs to call his members back and join us in the hard work that lies ahead. Many of my friends are unhappy. They think we should have kept our government closed indefinitely to protest the policies of the Trump administration. I share their opinions of this administration, but cannot accept a strategy which wages political battle at the expense of my neighbor's paycheck or the food for his children. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is the Senate in a quorum call?
No.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity to come to address my colleagues today in the Senate, Mr. President. During the course of this shutdown, what has now become the longest shutdown in American history, there are a lot of people around the country wondering about what has been at stake in this debate and in this argument. And I think with every day that has gone by, it has become clearer and clearer what is at stake. I have heard my Republican colleagues, including the leader of the Republican Party in the Senate, come to the floor to say over and over and over again that not a single Republican in this chamber, not a single Republican in the United States Congress voted for the Affordable Care Act when we passed it in 2010. And for them, that's a badge of honor. That's a badge of honor that they recall from the last extensive debate we had around here about health care. And I deeply regret the fact that they are so proud of not having voted for the Affordable Care Act. It's true, there was not a single Republican in the Congress that voted for that bill. And that bill was far from perfect, I'll admit that. Even at the time, I was leading the fight for a public option to be included as part of the Affordable Care Act, Mr. President, because I thought it would be a very important part of constraining costs for the American people in our health care system. I'll say more about that in a minute. In the end, it was not included. In the end, we couldn't overcome the objections of the special interests who wanted to not deny the American people that choice, but it was an important case to be made, and we made that case. But I voted in the end for the Affordable Care Act, even though the public option was left out of it, because it did some really important things for the health care system in America. And most of those had to do with making sure that the insurance companies couldn't throw you off your insurance just because you got sick, that cancer and other conditions could no longer be a pre-existing condition, that you could still get health care even if you had the misfortune, as I have had, of having cancer, that there would be no lifetime cap that would prevent you from being able to provide health care or mental health care for your children or for your family just because things had gotten expensive over a period of time. And these were really critical decisions that were made as part of that bill, in addition to the expansion of Medicaid across the country, to be able to ensure that more working people had the chance to be able to afford health care. Which brings to mind one of the really unusual, the unusual context in which we have health care debates in America, which is that we are the only rich country in the world. We are the only industrialized country among all industrialized countries where health care is not a right of citizenship for everyone who lives in that country. And notwithstanding the fact that we have less access to health care than any other industrialized country in the world, it costs twice as much in the United States. It costs twice as much for the federal government. It costs twice as much for our society. And most important, it costs twice as much for the people that we represent in our various states, including in the state of Colorado. People in Colorado, as we meet here, are struggling with the cost of housing, the cost of food, the cost of President Trump's uncertain and unpredictable tariff policy. But they are also continuing to struggle with the cost of health care because we are spending twice what any other industrialized country is spending to get a worse result. I know the President knows this, the President of the Senate knows this, because he's a doctor. And I've heard him talk about the condition of our health care system, Today in the United States, our life expectancy is 6 years shorter than it is in any of those industrialized countries. What greater indictment could there be of this system? In the 1970s, we had the same life expectancy as the rest of these countries. In fact, we were in the middle. And in the years since, we have fallen farther and farther and farther behind as we have spent more and more and more money. Because the system we have is so shot through with benefits for special interests, among other things, and a complete lack of transparency, which is a fancy way for saying that literally nobody has any idea what anything costs in our healthcare system. I know the presiding officer agrees with that. You can't tell what anything costs. When you show up to fill a prescription, when you're in the emergency room, we've worked together on the surprise billing issue, which is an important part of this. If you're a senior that's trying to get your prescriptions filled, you go from one pharmacy to the next to the next. I'll never forget, as long as I serve in public office, and probably for my lifetime, the conversation I had with senior citizens in Pueblo, where they basically were telling me that their entire retirement was spent fighting to get prescriptions filled that their doctors had assigned them, prescribed them. Seniors in other countries, in other industrialized countries, don't spend their retirements doing that. Only in the richest country in the world do seniors have to do that. And that's because a lack of transparency, a lack of clarity is built into our healthcare system from top to bottom. But we took some important steps in the Affordable Care Act. I wish that it had included a public option. It didn't. I think that the rate of rise of our healthcare inflation would have been a lot less. And by the way, that is what the people that have looked at that bill and scored that bill over the years have said. We've been fighting for it now for a decade and a half. They've said that it would actually save the government money because it would lower healthcare costs. It would introduce some competition into our insurance market. And I'll say this to the presiding officer, he'd probably be amused by it. This is the one place where I really am a Bolshevik. I believe in universal health care for all Americans. I think we should provide that to people in this country as a right. There is no reason not to do it in the richest country in the world, especially if we can save half of the cost of health care that we're providing now. And families all over my state, all over Colorado, are fighting to get their kid the mental health care that they need, are fighting to get their parents the prescriptions that they have been prescribed, are fighting to hold on to their own health insurance because that also has become less and less affordable over the years. That is a fight that no one else in the industrialized world has to have. And I think it's important to point out that most of the people that I'm talking about, almost all the people that I'm talking about, are working for a living in this country and still can't afford health care, still can't afford the peace of mind that they know that if their kid breaks their leg on a hike or breaks their leg skiing or needs to have the benefit of a mental health counselor, that's something that our safety net provides. Because health care should be a right. It is a right. And whether you get it or not shouldn't be determined on how wealthy you are or where you live, Mr. President. And I think given the rhetoric that I hear out here sometimes about makers and takers and all that other stuff, it's important to point out that almost all the people that I'm talking about are working or taking care of children or are retired. We should have a universal health care system in this country. But in the meantime, Mr. President, we shouldn't be making matters worse, which is why this debate is so crazy. When we passed the Affordable Care Act without a single vote from the Republican Party in the House or the Senate, they said that they were going to make President Obama a one-term president. They said I was going to lose my Senate seat. In fact, I was asked on national television whether I would lose my Senate seat as a result of my vote on the health care bill, and I said, if that's the cost of being here for that period of time, it's worth it. I'm happy to lose based on that vote. And they ran ad after ad after ad during that campaign, attacking me for being the 60th vote for the Affordable Care Act. And because I survived and a couple other senators barely survived, we were able to preserve that bill, and 30 million people who would have lost their health insurance in America didn't lose their health insurance. And then the efforts in the House began to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And Mr. President, they voted, I lost count, I think it was 70 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act in the House of Representatives, at least 70 times. They never were able to do it, and the longer it was there, the more people came to see the benefits of the insurance protection, came to see the benefits of the expansion in Medicaid, came to see the benefits of at least having a little bit of comfort that they couldn't just throw you off your insurance because they felt like it. And now we have found ourselves in a debate related to the tax credits that so many Americans rely on to make the insurance just a little bit more affordable. I wouldn't say affordable. I'd say a little bit more affordable. I'd say barely affordable, but somewhat more affordable at a moment when grocery prices are what they are, at a moment when rent is what it is, at a moment when we're dealing with the incredible uncertainty that these tariffs are causing. It would seem the least we could do is not make matters worse. The least we could do is extend the benefit, the tax credit, so it's a little bit easier for people to buy insurance for themselves and for their families. But just like, Mr. President, with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, when not a single Republican supported it, just like when they voted 70 times in the House of Representatives, 70 times to repeal the Affordable Care Act, during this period, this episode, this shutdown, the longest in American history, the Republicans have voted 15 times to take away those benefits from the American people that they're relying on just to make insurance a little bit affordable. And we have taken the position that we shouldn't make matters worse. And, Mr. President, that's why I voted again against the budget that's been proposed by President Trump and the Republicans, because they refuse to extend the tax credits. They refuse to make things just a little bit better for the American people. I can't say I'm surprised by the position. Who could be surprised? After a vote on the Affordable Care Act where nobody joined it, all those years of voting to repeal it, running to make President Obama, they said, a one-term president. And now the vote, day after day after day, to not provide the American people the benefit of those tax credits. And before this debate closes, I just want to say again, Mr. President, that the current system is in dire need of help. The American people are hanging on to their fingertips when it comes to the cost and availability of health care. There is no rich country in the world that doesn't have a universal system of health care. There is no rich country in the world that doesn't routinely supply access to doctors and primary care, access to mental health care for families and for kids, prescription drugs that don't cost an arm and a leg. It is not a pain point for those people in the different phases of their lives, much less a pain point every single day, which it is for the people that I represent in Colorado. So apparently President Trump is going to get his way, and those tax credits are not going to be extended by the majority here. And the cost of health insurance in Colorado is going to increase by 200% for some people, 300% for some people, 400% for people that are living in rural areas in my state. That's thousands and thousands of dollars to a typical family that just doesn't have that kind of money, Mr. President. And I just want to remind everybody in this chamber that when this debate is done, we still have a very important project that we need to be engaged with the American people. And that is to be able to provide a health care system like other wealthy and industrialized countries have provided, where people can count on their health care, where they know it's not going to cost them an arm and a leg, where they know in the course of their lifetime there are other things they can worry about, like the cost of their rent and the cost of food. But one thing we're going to do is take care of this problem, just as countries all over the world have taken care of it for their citizens. I wish I could say that the politics around health care have gotten better over the years that I've been here. They really haven't, Mr. President. But I think that the debate that we have had in this moment is going to serve to clarify who's fighting to try to make this system better for the American people and who's not. I guarantee you this, as long as we have President Trump and the White House and a majority of the Republicans in this chamber, we will never have political leadership that's fighting for universal health care, that's fighting for a public option that can be available to every single family in America. By the way, that's my proposal. It relies on everybody in America to make the best choice for their family. It's not something that would be imposed from here. It'd be the chance for every family to say, you know what, I'll stay with the private insurance I have, or actually I'd rather be on a system that's run by Medicare, where I know I'm going to have access to mental health care and health care for my family in a predictable way. And I'll just close. I can see my colleague from Massachusetts. I'll close by saying my heart especially aches for young people across this country, the people the age of my own daughters. I had a young woman ask me the other day, a recent graduate of Western State in Gunnison, Colorado. She said, "I'm coming off my parents' insurance when after I'm 26. You'll remember we put that in the health care bill. Before that, there was no opportunity for people to stay on their parents' insurance. We did it. We said you get to stay until you're 26. But then she said to me, Senator, what am I supposed to do? Take 2 or 3 jobs to pay for my health insurance when I have to come off my parents' insurance? And I said, that is exactly the right question. That is a question that 26 and 27 and 28-year-olds are not having to ask in any other industrialized country in the world. Only in the United States of America are we running a system where young people in their 20s have to decide between health insurance and their rent, or health insurance and food, or health insurance and the ability to put some money away to save for a house. And we should change that. I believe strongly that if we ever get to the point where we're expanding Medicare in this country, we should do it for the younger kids that are in their 20s first, because they've done absolutely nothing to design the system that they're inheriting. Mr. President, with that, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, our dedicated federal workers deserve to get paid. And I'm glad this deal means that the government will reopen, that public servants will be returning to work, and that they will receive their paychecks, including back pay. And I'm also pleased that this deal will prevent Donald Trump from further delaying SNAP benefits for hungry children, senior citizens, and families. Using hungry people as political pawns, which is what Donald Trump has been doing, is disgusting. But this legislation does nothing concrete to lower costs or protect health care for millions of Americans from MAGA Republican attacks. There's 22 million Americans who are going to see dramatic increases in their health care costs at the end of this year. 22 million Americans who are going to be very concerned about the health care of their families. I cannot support this deal. I cannot support a deal that does not say to those 22 million American families, including 337,000 of them in the state of Massachusetts, that we have not been able to reach an agreement here because Republicans refuse to come to the table to talk about their health care costs that are about to skyrocket, and for many of those 22 million families, skyrocket out of the ability of those families to even have health insurance. And this is on top of their housing bills, their grocery bills, their electricity bills, all of their day-to-day needs that are absolutely skyrocketing. And of course, if they can't already deal with all of those other bills, seeing those bills skyrocket thousands of dollars for their health care, or tens of thousands of dollars for their health care, because of the Republicans' decision to kill critical Affordable Care Act tax credits, are going to be devastating for those families. I have one constituent, Jeff from Natick, who right now, because of the health care tax credits, has a $30,000 bill for his stage 4 cancer drugs, lung cancer. If they expire, his bill is $300,000 a year. That's what we should be debating out here. And by the way, there are 22 million stories just like that that are about to hit American families. And this health insurance time bomb, coupled with deep cuts to Medicaid, will also be a brutal 1-2 punch which devastates community hospitals throughout the United States, leaving millions of Americans with reduced care or no care at all. So here's what we have right now. 22 million American families are starting to think about what's going to be on their table for Thanksgiving. Just coming up in 2-3 weeks. And for all of them, they're saying, we're losing the tax subsidies, the tax credits that help us to pay for our health care bills. 22 million Americans will have that as their primary conversation this Thanksgiving. The Republicans who serve in the House and Senate, they're not going to have that conversation because their health care coverage is going to continue. So what about those 22 million American families this Christmas, this Thanksgiving, who are losing their benefits? What are the Republicans saying to them? Because they're going to be scared. They're going to be angry that they will not be able to afford this holiday or any holiday in the future because their health care bills are just going to be going up by thousands, tens of thousands of dollars a year, which they don't have. And again, it's in the context of their electricity rates, their food costs, their clothing costs. Everything is skyrocketing for them. And they're not getting raises that will help them to pay for it. 22 million American families. So let me just tell you, I heard from Laurie in North Truro, the insurance for her and her husband is increasing from $6,000 a year to $26,400 a year. Who can afford to pay more on health insurance? Who can afford to pay $20,000 more on their health insurance and just get the notice now that it's over on December 31st and have the Republicans just walking away from that problem for Laurie and for 22 million other Americans? Now they're going to have to decide, do I take the funding from retirement savings? Do they just do without other things in their families' lives? Because $20,000 is a lot for a family who are not millionaires. Millionaires don't qualify for this tax credit. It's just regular families. It's middle-class families. That's who qualifies. And they just don't have 20 extra grand under the cushion that can pay for their health insurance. So this is a tragedy in the making and one that we can't avoid. But let's not fool ourselves. Trump and MAGA Republicans have been shutting down the government since Inauguration Day. Gutting Medicare, gutting Medicaid, gutting the Affordable Care Act. That was their big vote in the first week of July of this year, 2025. Gutting, gutting, gutting. Medicare, Medicaid, the Affordable Care Act. They have been committing the greatest health care heist in history, and it's all to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. They're looting the health care for middle-class families, poor families, in order to pay for tax breaks for people who already have too much. The top 3 hedge fund managers in the United States have more wealth than the bottom 50% of our entire population combined. Think about that. And it's that bottom 50% that qualifies for Medicaid, that qualifies for the Affordable Care Act tax subsidies. That's who we're talking about right now. Those are the people who are going to be most negatively impacted. And the American people want us to stop this health care heist. They don't want Democrats to be driving the getaway car with all of those tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, which will just be transferred into the bank accounts of the wealthiest people in our country. So we should just be fighting for transformative policies that fix our broken healthcare system, bring us back from the brink of this crisis. That's what the American people want us to do. That's what they want us to fight for. And even when it's hardest, even when we're in the darkest moments, we have to remember what we are fighting for. A better future is still possible. One where one missed medical bill won't lead to bankruptcy. A future where families don't have to choose between a prescription and a meal. A future where malignant corporate greed in our healthcare system that shutters hospitals and endangers patients. A future where universal healthcare is taken for granted and not taken away. A future where families can afford their healthcare and their rent and their electricity bills and childcare and to save money for college or vacation or retirement. That is the future that we should be fighting for. But the American people did not see that from the United States Senate yesterday. So that's where we are right now. We're in the throes of a healthcare crisis. 22 million Americans this Thanksgiving will be at their tables, if they can even afford to celebrate Thanksgiving, looking at tens of thousands of additional dollars potentially on their health care bills. It's a catastrophe looming. The Republicans so far have refused to do anything about it. That's what we should be discussing. That's what we should be debating. How do we solve this problem? Instead, the Republicans are just punting this issue. They are absolutely ignoring the consequences for those 22 million American families. So I'll just say this. These families, they are scared. These families, they are angry. But I'll say this, in addition to those 22 million families, tens of millions of other families are angry for them. They are pissed that people are going to be victimized by having their tax credits just be pulled away from them for their health care bills, and then that health care is going to be unaffordable for them. 22 million people and their families in our country. That is what we should be talking about here. And now the Republicans at the 11th hour are asking us to trust them that they will have a vote on extending the tax credits Americans rely on to afford their insurance. Remember when earlier this year Trump promised, we're not going to touch Medicaid. Remember that? Trump said, we're not going to touch Medicaid. 4 months later, he decimated it. Remember when Trump promised he would love and cherish Medicare? Then he slashed $500 billion from Medicare. How are we supposed to trust them? So to all of the Senate Republicans inclined to oppose a simple one-year extension of the Affordable Care Act, premium tax credits when a vote is held in December, credits that are hugely popular in both red and blue states, just remember that you do so at your own political peril. The American people are watching. They're angry. They want to know who is on their side. And they're going to remember your vote. They're going to remember your vote if you do not solve this problem. Thanksgiving is going to be the worst Thanksgiving ever for millions of families, knowing that they're going to lose their health insurance. And the Republicans can do something about it. And unless and until they do so, then we're about to hit a healthcare tragedy that was avoidable and that the Republicans have, in fact, created. This is a man-made crisis, and that man is the President of the United States, and the Republicans here on the floor of the Senate are following him blindly in a way that is going to result in harm to 22 million Americans and their families. So this is the moment, this is the time, this is the place, this is where people should be standing up to fight for those people. Health is the first wealth. Health is the most important wealth. Without your health, you have nothing. You have nothing. Everything else is built upon health. Everything. And the Republicans are taking away that health care from 22 million Americans. This is not the way to send families into Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is not the way we should be treating people. We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Yale University has made it very clear that 50,000 people additionally are going to die per year if all of Trump's health care cuts go into place. That's 500,000 people dying over the next 10 years if these health care premiums, if Medicaid is slashed. That's on this body. That's on this Senate. That's on the Republican leadership. And all I can say to you is that this is a mistake. It's an historic mistake. It's cruel. It's wrong. It's not what we should be doing to those who are most vulnerable, most in need in our country. And that's is what the Republicans are about to perpetrate upon this country. We're better than this. You can't have trillions of dollars in tax breaks for the wealthiest and then saying we don't have enough money for those who are sickest. You only have room for a tax break after you've taken care of the sickest people, the people most in need of health care in our society. That's when you have room for tax breaks for billionaires. The Republicans are doing just the opposite. First, tax breaks for billionaires. Then we'll see what's left over. Oh, they say, we can't afford health care for 22 million Americans. We can't afford to take care of their families because we don't have enough money. Why don't you have enough money? Because you gave the tax breaks to billionaires. You gave the tax breaks to millionaires. That's why you don't have enough money. And who are you going to take? Who are you going to take it out on? Who are you going to say all of a sudden with your green eye shades that you're really concerned about the federal budget deficit? You're going to take it out upon those who are least healthy, those most in need of help in our society? No, we're better than that. So this is a historic mistake. But just remember, the Republicans have always harbored an ancient animosity towards Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. They voted against all of those programs. And now with Donald Trump, they have an ability to gut them. And that's what they're doing. That's what they're doing. When they had a chance to stand up and say, no, let's be reasonable, let's keep the health care subsidies, which are most needed, they just are walking away right now. Donald Trump operates under Godfather Part 1 rules. He gives them offers they can't refuse. And we saw that with senators who tried to stand up to say, no, Medicaid cuts are too deep. The Affordable Care Act cuts are too deep. Trump just called them and said, your career is over. You will not be a senator again. So now we're seeing the remaining senators who are here, who are Republicans. And they are just saying, whatever you want, Mr. Trump, whatever Russell Vought wants at OMB, whatever Stephen Miller wants, we'll do. We're not going to have a negotiation. We're not going to sit down. So before they cut the Medicaid and the Medicare programs back in July, did they negotiate with us? No, they did not. They refused to negotiate with Democrats at all. That's who they are. They saw their one opportunity to slash it once and for all. So all I can say is that we're in an incredible moment. The Republican House members still are not back in Washington. They've been in a 6-week witness protection program. They refuse to come back to Washington. They refuse to sit down. They refuse to negotiate. So we're witnessing Robin Hood in reverse. We're seeing money taken from the poorest and given to the richest. That's what this is all about. And what they're taking from the poorest and the middle class are their health care. It's their protections. So from my perspective, this is a mistake. It's a historic mistake. And it is a mistake that will come back to haunt the Republican Party at the ballot box next year. With that, Mr. President, I yield back.
Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, I've been coming to the floor to speak about how can we go forward in a way which actually lowers lowers the cost of having health insurance for those who are on the exchanges and begin to build to a future where we lower the cost of health insurance and health care for everybody, whether you're on an Obamacare exchange or an employer-sponsored insurance or you name it. And so we know there's going to be a vote as part of this agreement to reopen the government on what to do about the exchanges. So we need to be thinking and talking about the solutions that are out there that benefit the American people. And of course, what the issue is underlying, people cannot afford their health insurance. They cannot afford their health care. Those are two different things, by the way. The cost of health care is what dictates, theoretically at least, the price of health insurance. If you lower the cost of health care, then you will lower the price of health insurance. I saw this as a physician practicing in a hospital for the uninsured for 20 years. I should say the uninsured and the poorly insured. There have been middle-income people who could not afford their insurance and or could not afford their health care. So how do we get out of it? Well, first, it's complicated. We've got to be creative, and we got to abandon set positions. Sometimes we're in this chamber, and all we do is stick to our guns, and if the other party suggests something, we automatically reject it. We've got to move beyond that, not as, oh my gosh, the other side proposes, I reject, but rather, wait a second, let's listen. Is there a solution here that can benefit the American people? Now, Obamacare tried to make, and has tried to make, health care affordable, health insurance affordable, by just throwing billions at it. And the problem with that doesn't make health care affordable. It just makes the health insurance premium less expensive for those who are on the exchanges. But this actually drives up the cost of insurance for some and does nothing about the underlying health care costs driving up the premiums for others. So what's my proposal? I would propose that we instead of paying insurance companies to manage more of our billions, why don't we trust the American people to manage their own resources, to manage their own care, with something which I call a pre-funded federal flexible spending account. Now let's first talk about the enhanced premium tax credit, which is the center of this discussion. Just a primer. Let's get the basics. There are two types of premium tax credits used to fund insurance for those who are on the Obamacare exchanges. One is the baseline tax credit in the original Obamacare law, which helps pay for the premiums for those who earn less than 400% of the federal poverty level. But that didn't control costs, and so during the COVID epidemic, the Biden administration put in something called the enhanced premium tax credit. It provides some additional benefits for those less than 400% of federal poverty, but it gave additional benefits for those above 400% of federal poverty. If you will, acknowledging that Obamacare had not controlled health care costs and premiums on the exchanges for those above 400% have become unaffordable. So, let's be clear. The discussion we're having now is not about the baseline premium tax credits. It is about the enhanced premium tax credits, which started under the Biden administration. So it begs the question, why were enhanced premium tax credits necessary? Well, as we've said, the cost of health care has continued to rise. And you can argue that if you're going to an insurance company and you're saying, we're going to give you more money if health care costs more, that they do not have the incentive to help control those health care costs. Now, I am not here to bash insurance companies. They are essential to our society. So just put that out there. But if you have the choice of giving the money to the patient for her to manage it or giving it to the insurance company, I think we should give it to the patient. So, the question is, can we put in programs that lower the cost of health care? How long will they take effect? And what do we do in the interim? Well, it's too soon this coming year to put in programs to lower the cost of health care. but it's not too soon, which is to say we can put in programs that empower patients to manage their costs and give them the money as opposed to giving it to the health insurance company. But to do that, we got to think differently. So, how do we lower costs for the coming year for the individual who's on the exchanges? Now, it's important to realize that the total cost of having health insurance is not just the premium, but it includes the deductible and the copay. So if you can help with the deductible and the copay, that is as effective or even more effective than helping with the premiums. So what I'm proposing is something which actually helps the patient become a wise consumer of health, helping her with the premium and the copay, working with the health insurance policy, but in a way which lowers their cost. Now, let me be clear. This is not the official Republican position. President Trump has endorsed the concept, but it's not, say, for Leader Thune. But I am the chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, which has jurisdiction over this, and we will be having hearings in the near future to address this. And my motivation is as a senator and as a doctor who wants to make health care more affordable for all Americans. So let's discuss what I'm calling a pre-funded, flexible, can you get my marks a lot again? A pre-funded flexible spending account. So first, here's what we currently have: an enhanced premium tax credit, which is going to take $26 billion next year and give it to insurance companies to tell the patient what she can buy and what she cannot buy. Now, I have a typo here, and I fixed it yesterday, but I got to fix it once more. 20% of the money, 20% of the $26 billion going out the door to help pay for insurance premiums actually will go for deductibles, will go for profit and overhead of the insurance company. So let me just change this right here. Again, I had a typo yesterday, I have a typo today. 20% of the money we're giving to the insurance companies under the enhanced premium tax credits goes for profit and it goes for administrative overhead. Only 80% goes to pay for the insurance premium, to pay for health care costs for the person who's the recipient. Let's speak of what I am describing, the pre-funded flexible savings account. Pre-funded because you take the enhanced premium tax credit, instead of giving it to the insurance company, you give it to the individual and her family through a flexible spending account. A flexible spending account which millions of Americans already have. She can use this money to pay for prescription drugs, for dental work, for medical care, eyeglasses, orthodontia, much more flexibility than through a traditional insurance policy. And the key thing is, whereas if we give the money to the insurance company, 20% goes for profit and overhead. If we give it to the patient, 100% goes to health care that she needs. 100% goes to her family's health care needs. 100%, not 80%. This is better value for the health care dollar. Next, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Do I have another slide or not? I have to stand on this floor. Now, who would get it? Every eligible American citizen on the exchange would receive a pre-funded flexible spending account equal in value to the enhanced premium tax credit they would have received had the money gone to their insurance company. It doesn't pay for insurance premiums, but it pays for the actual health care that they actually need. Now, I'm pleased to say, next one, President Trump has tweeted in support of the concept. Now, of course, I'm pleased to be aligned with the president on this. He says he recommends that instead of giving hundreds of billions of dollars, and this is President Trump's rhetoric, to money-sucking insurance companies, the money should be sent directly to the people so they can purchase their own much better health care. Notice the caps. That is a President Trump tweet. I'm pleased to be aligned with the president. But for my Democratic colleagues that want to guarantee that whatever we pass will get a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives, this is effectively a guarantee that if we pass a program like this, it can get a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. If the president asks Speaker Mike Johnson to bring it up for a vote, Speaker Johnson will. So if you're just thinking, just imagine, my Democratic colleagues, how do we get something that 100% of the money goes for real health care? It doesn't go to insurance companies where 20% goes for profit and overhead. It's a system already used by millions of Americans. And may I say, it all but guarantees to get a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. This tweet gives them that assurance. Now, some immediately begin to criticize the president, assuming that he was going to take all the money going for health insurance premiums and put it in one of these flexible spending accounts. That's not true. Go back to what I said earlier. We only are talking about the enhanced premium tax credits, which would pre-fund this flexible spending account. We are not talking about the baseline premium tax credits that are part of the original Obamacare article. By the way, Republicans want people to have coverage. This doctor who used to take care of the uninsured wants people to have coverage. Now, the more I've discussed this, and this is the fourth or fifth time I've given this talk, I'm pleased to say that some of my Democratic colleagues are saying, hey, we can talk about this. Not quite there yet, but I see the wisdom of it. I'm willing to move forward with it, and I thank them for that. I want everybody in the Senate to put aside their prejudice, which sometimes is that if one side proposes it, it must be wrong. And I'll say to my Democratic colleagues, what I am proposing with the pre-funded flexible spending account is actually more closely aligned with how the original authors of the Affordable Care Act wanted that legislation to be implemented. I find it ironic that some of my Democratic colleagues are rejecting something which is closer to the original bill. But I think they're rejecting it in part because of misunderstanding, lack of knowledge, and maybe for some because the Republican is proposing. Put that trench warfare mentality behind you. Think about it. Could this be better for the American people? Can this accomplish the goal of making the possession of health insurance and paying for my family's health care more affordable? Now, for those who think this is too complicated, let me say that 72% of Americans who get their health insurance through a federal employer, a state employer, a local employer, 72% of us have a flexible spending account. My family and I have a flexible spending account. 47% of Americans who are in private insurance have access to a flexible spending account. Doesn't mean they take it, but it just means they have access. Millions of Americans are already using flexible spending accounts. What I'm proposing, let's just give the same option to people who are on the individual exchanges. Now, and by the way, let me just make the point. My wife and I, our family, we are on the Obamacare Small Business Exchange. Everybody in Congress is on a Obamacare Small Business Exchange. I am getting my flexible spending account through an exchange. All we're saying is open up the window just a little bit to allow those who are on the individual exchanges to likewise access that which I am getting through the Small Business Exchange. This merely extends what is current law for some people on their health plan to extend it to those who are within the individual exchange. The federal government can take the laws, the tools, the vendors, the department it is already using and implement a pre-funded flexible spending account for those on the individual exchange. Why is that important? Because that can happen for plan year 2026. I'm asked, well, what are we going to do about the people next year? This is about next year. How can we help those folks signing up for insurance right now for 2026? This brings them benefit right now for 2026. Now, let me now kind of go through the differences between the enhanced premium tax credit and a federally funded flexible spending account. And this is kind of the money chart, if you will. If you're with me in concept that maybe this could work, hopefully, I can convince people who might be watching, my Democratic colleagues who might be listening, to give power to the patients instead of giving enhanced premium tax credits to insurance companies. Okay, who gets the money? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, the insurance company gets the money, and 20% of it goes for overhead and for profit. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, a patient and the family controls the money. What can it be used for? The enhanced premium tax credit, it can be used for insurance premiums. Under the pre-funded flexible spending account, it can be used for real care, if you will. Dental visits, physician visits, eyeglasses, prescriptions, orthodontia. It has more flexibility than the traditional insurance policy has. Who makes the decision? Well, the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rule. Under the enhanced premium tax credit going to insurance companies, the insurance company makes the decision. They decide what care you have, where you get it, and how much you are charged. When you have a pre-funded flexible spending account, the patient makes the difference. The patient makes the decision. She decides where the dollars go. I always use the feminine because women make 95% of health care decisions for themselves, their family, for their spouse, for their boyfriend. I always chuckle. Guys are the stupidest thing in the world when it comes to their health care, maybe a couple other things. But the people that care about this are typically women, and so I speak to her. And does it lower cost? Under the enhanced premium tax credit, there's really minimal incentive for the insurance company to attempt to lower cost. So therefore, as costs go up, so do premiums. On the other hand, under a pre-funded flexible spending account, you empower patients to shop, which drives competition. One example, I was once stopped on the street by someone who had seen one of my talks, and she goes, "You talked about using cash or using my flexible spending account or using my health savings account to buy something." There was a MRI ordered for my son's shoulder. My deductible was $5,000. The MRI was going to cost $2,000. I was going to have to pay $2,000 for my son's MRI of his shoulder. And I said, "Wait, do you have a cash price?" "Oh, well, your cash price is $600. If you don't want to go through the insurance company, your cash price is $600. Now, the typical Obamacare plan has a deductible anywhere from $3,000 to $6,800. So if we're talking about an MRI costing $2,000, you're still within the deductible. If you have a flexible spending account, you're not paying for that out of your pocket. You're paying for it with your flexible spending account, and you can ask, what if I give you cash instead? And they'll give you the lower price, not the higher price if there's a lower cash price, and there often is. This turns that woman, that family, into an informed consumer, and that begins to drive down the cost. This is the essence of giving power to a patient. The patient picks the best deal for her health and the best deal for her family's pocketbook. The pre-funded flexible spending account doesn't treat someone like a dependent of the federal government. They treat them like somebody who can make wise decisions for themselves and empowers them to make wiser decisions than the insurance company itself can. Now, some will ask, how much money does it cost? The first year, depending on how we structure it, it might cost just as much as our enhanced premium tax credits. Why? Because we're going to take the amount of money that would go for the enhanced premium tax credit and put it into a pre-funded flexible spending account. My Democratic colleagues should like that. They should say, wait a second, okay, it's still given the same value. In fact, I would argue better value, because when you give it to the insurance company, 20% goes to profit and overhead, and when you give it to the patient, 100% goes to real care, but the cost the first year will be about the same. But I will repeat, the difference is where the money goes. Because it goes 100% for real care, there's more value for every federal dollar. And once more, It's in the family's vested interest, financial interest, to purchase wisely, and that begins to drive down health care costs. And that, coupled with other reforms in year 2 of this program, in year 2, would begin to reflect itself in lower premiums. So, to conclude, here's the choice before us. We can keep paying insurance companies to hide the cost of higher premiums behind confusing bills, rising premiums, in a system which actually raises costs for many. Or we can give the patient the tool and trust her to pay for her care directly at fair prices with transparency. If we will, it puts patients before insurance companies. It encourages competition. It encourages and rewards smart choices. It begins to make health care truly affordable, not by inflating subsidies, but by unleashing the power of the consumer. Let's stop writing blank checks to bureaucracies and insurance companies. Let's invest in our fellow Americans. If you will, invest in you. This is going to be a little risky. We're doing something different. We'll be saying, oh, I'm not just going to be a Democrat, I'm not just going to be a Republican, I'm actually going to try and come together to find a solution to benefit all Americans. Imagine that. Congress putting partisan politics behind us to come up with a creative solution that actually benefits Americans a little bit out of our comfort zone. It's what we should be doing every day. I call upon us to do that today. We have to be willing to take the risk to solve the problem, not be afraid to do something different. We have to be willing to tackle complex problems, not retreat to our trench, which is labeled Republican or Democrat, and be afraid to come out to find a creative solution. I'm a Republican, but more than that, I'm a doctor who for 20 years tried to care for those who could not afford their health care or their health insurance. I invite my 99 colleagues to join me trying to find affordable health care and affordable insurance for fellow Americans. Let's be creative. Let's do it. And let's not just reject the proposal because maybe my side or your side proposed it. Let's fix health care. Let's give patients the power. And with that, I yield.